By the way, speaking of AI, does it emergence, at least the way it's designed and utilized now, only accelerate this process of enshitification? Because it certainly seems like that to me.
So one of the things that AI is pretty good at is like doing minor variations to kind of edge people towards some state or another. So there's this thing called algorithmic wage discrimination. It's a term coined by the scholar Vina Dubel. She originally used it to describe how Uber pays its drivers. So Uber will periodically lowball a driver by just a little bit, offering them a little bit less per mile or per minute than they would normally get. And if the driver accepts the ride, then that's the new normal. And then they start to lowball them again. So they're just tightering the dose down a little bit in these
Jesus
small
Christ.
random increments. And the
Yeah.
idea is like, if you're picky as a driver, it's because you've got a side hustle, right? You've got something else that lets you be selective. But if Uber can like trap you in this lowering wage, then maybe whatever it is you used to do, you can't do anymore. And so now you're dependent on Uber. So that's the thing that these things are really good at. This is even worse when it's applied to other labor markets. So preferentially in the United States, hospitals source their nurses as contract workers. They want to do union avoidance, so they don't want to hire staff nurses. So they understaff the wards and then they hire day nurses. And these day nurses, they used to get their work through staffing agencies, and there'd be a few in every town. And these days, those have all been replaced by 4 giant apps, each of which calls itself Uber for nursing. And just like Uber, they try to do algorithmic wage discrimination. So like I said, we haven't had a new privacy law in this country since 1988 with the Video Privacy Protection Act. And so we have this totally unregulated data broker sector, and they will sell anyone any information about anyone. So the way that these nursing apps work is before you're offered a shift, the app will go and connect to a data broker and look up your credit. And if you're carrying a lot of credit card debt, and especially if it's delinquent, you get offered a lower wage, right? Because you're probably more economically desperate. What that means is that the nurse who's inserting your catheter probably drove Uber till midnight the night before and then skipped breakfast to make rent because their wages are being forced down, right? And so keeping people in that desperation equilibrium, it's the kind of thing that you can automate well with technologies that these days we call AI. A few years ago we called machine learning. It's just, it's a pretty straightforward algorithm, but it's like the kind of thing that AI is pretty good at. Mostly, I'm not as worried about AI as a technology because it's such a disgusting investment bubble that is going to burst and take the economy with it. 31% of the S&P 500 is 7 AI companies, none of which are profitable, all of which are hundreds of billions of dollars into capex they will never recoup on, all of which are losing billions of dollars a year. That when that
But aren't
market,
sorry to interrupt, but aren't they saying that Uber is still not profitable after all these years?
Depends on who you ask. I mean, Uber's found some profit. So what Uber did for a lot of years, so Uber, the way that Uber got lock-in was the Saudi royal family gave them $31 billion, which they funneled through Masayoshi Son's and WeWork, or not WeWork, SoftBank, which funded WeWork and Uber, is funding OpenAI, was funding Yahoo in the years when it bought every promising Web 2.0 startup and then killed it. This guy's like a menace. And so Masayoshi Son gives $31 billion in Saudi royal money to Uber. Uber loses 41 cents on the dollar for 13 years because they are charging so much less for rides than it costs to provide them. Cities start to underinvest in transit because why would you ride the bus when you get an Uber so cheaply? And all the other cab companies go out of business. And so now in most places, it's just Uber or Uber and Lyft. And so they have this gigantic lock-in. And so the question was always, well, can Uber eventually make money? So for a long time, they relied on these weird accounting tricks. Like they would say, okay, well, we entered all these other markets. Like we went into China and Indonesia and India and Japan and whatever. And we started these companies and they were all unsuccessful. So we sold them to other unsuccessful competitors. So like Didi bought Uber China, right? Now those companies, they're also not public, but we are now holding a bunch of their non-public, non-liquid stock. And this year, we think that stock has doubled in price. Not because anyone's buying it or selling it. It is illiquid. It's a private company. But we are going to book that as $11 billion in revenue for this year, right? So they're just like making up numbers. This is how WeWork operated too. They just made up numbers and added them to their balance sheet. More recently, because Uber has doubled the price of rides and halved the price of driver compensation on average, by playing these games with pricing, where they'll do to you what they do to drivers, where periodically they'll charge you more, and if you accept the ride, they'll charge you more again next time and next time. They're trying to find the equilibrium of your willingness to pay. And they're using behavioral cues. At one point, there was an Uber executive who said that they were using whether your battery was about to die to raise prices. They later walked that claim back. I don't know if it's true or not. One of the things about Uber's app, like all apps, is that because it is locked up, because it has a digital lock around it, what if you're a gamer, you might call digital rights management, it's illegal to reverse engineer it and try and look inside and see how it works. Because in 1998, Bill Clinton signed a law that bans reverse engineering where there's DRM involved. And so we can't really study how Uber works. We can only make indirect observations. So there's people like the rideshare guy who's got a popular YouTube channel who will get a bunch of Uber drivers in a room who all have different degrees of how often they drive and what kind of rides they accept. And all of them will get a page for the same ride, and they'll show their phones, and you can see the range of compensation and offer. Most of us don't do that as riders, but I bet if you did it as a rider, you'd find the same thing. So there's a possibility that Uber is now profitable. It's inched into profitability by squeezing riders and drivers so very hard.
Before I interrupted you, you said that the AI sector is a massive bubble right now.
Yeah. So I don't think I think those foundation models are not long for this world. I think the only reason they exist is because other people are giving AI grifters billions of dollars to keep the lights on at the data centers, and those people are going to expect a return on their investment. And when the market craters, they're going to pull out if they don't lose it all. And I think most of those servers will just be shut off. I think the foundation models are doomed. If you want to plan for the future of AI, I think you should plan for what you would do if you could buy GPUs at 10 cents on the dollar, hire a lot of unemployed applied statisticians, and optimize open source models that have barely been touched yet in terms of optimization and have lots of room for improvement. That's the future of AI. And it'll be a bunch of like marginally useful utilities that are kind of cool. Like I have a local model on my computer. I have this spreadsheet I have to parse once every 3 months of sales that I have to break out in this very specific way that's really hard. And it takes me 4 hours. And I broke it down. I did it yesterday because it was the first day of the quarter. We're recording this on October 2nd. So it was October 1st yesterday. And I used a model running locally on my computer, Llama, and I just broke it down with Llama. And I broke it down one step at a time so I could check the numbers at each step. It took me half an hour, right? That's going to be like a really useful thing. You don't have to pay for it. Llama's free, right? And it'll get faster and better with more open source hacking. So it's not a business. It's a consumer surplus.
Thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, follow and rate on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can also hype videos on YouTube now. Marketing tutorials insist. It's really important that I keep harping on and hassle you about that, so I'm doing it. Also, if you'd like to, please support me on Patreon. Again, this is a one-person podcast. I do everything by my little old self. There's no team behind me, but you can help by hopping on Patreon and finding the Smart Cookies podcast on there. And then last but certainly not least, I have to thank my existing patrons. Tovarishin Tovarishice, without you there would be no Smart Cookies, which makes you actual producers of this show. So eternal thanks goes to Delen Mia, Chert Gosar, Sasha Sodia, Richard, Amy Ons, Mattia Renchel, Florian Hawa, Peter Karba, Mattia Zupancic, Dejan Žolnir, Darej, Rok Tržan, Sasha Vipotnik, Neven Cvijanovic, Juš Premrov, Sirkezi, Goran Ivašić, Anže Sever, Ole, Marin Ferrara, Aljaš Mahar, Štrole, Ajda Macian, Miha Medved, Medinho, Goran, Gordan, Lorenzo, Jurečuk, Mila, Carmen, Veronica, and Taichi. That's a long list, and I'm super, super grateful that it's getting longer. I'm deeply touched. Thanks again for all your support. Bye-bye.